Welcome to the Complete Aviation Solutions, deep dive number 29, where we kind of dig into a bunch of aviation news and try to, break it all down.
Yeah, consider it your all access pass to what's really going on in the airline world.
Right.
From how they're growing to the regulations they have to deal with, even those supply chain issues that just don't seem to go away.
Oh, for sure. And we got 5 stories from all over that we want to dive into today.
So let's get right to it. First up, we're heading down to Australia, where Skytrans, they were just bought by Avia Solutions Group.
Yeah.
Well, they just got the okay to start flying those bigger narrow-body jets.
They've added an A319 to their fleet. That opens up a lot of possibilities for them, I would think.
Big time. See, Skytrans has always stuck to regional routes using those smaller planes. But now, with this A319, it looks like they're trying to get into the ACMI and charter market.
So they're thinking beyond just Australia, maybe the whole Asia-Pacific region.
Right. It's a bold move. Be interesting to see what kind of deals they snag. Think back to, mention a relevant example of a successful ACMI operation. Could Skytrans be on a similar path, you think? What do you think? Will it work for them?
That's a really good question. Really curious to see what they do with this new capability.
Now, while we're on the subject of big moves, let's hop over to Canada. Turkish Airlines, they had a bit of a snag.
I heard about this. They wanted to add a bunch more flights, right?
Yeah.
Like to Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver.
Yep, 5 extra flights every week. But the Canadian Transportation Agency said, nope, not happening.
Why did they say no? What's the deal there?
It all comes down to these things called bilateral agreements, right? Basically, countries agree on how many flights each other's airlines can operate between them. Turkish Airlines' request would have gone over the limit between Canada and Turkey.
Wow, so it's not just about an airline wanting to add flights. It's all tied up in these international agreements.
For sure. And here's another layer to it. Air Canada and some other Canadian airlines actually pushed back hard against Turkish Airlines expanding, said it would mess up the competition in Canada. So, yeah, these agreements, they really dictate how airlines can grow and how they compete with each other.
It's like this big chess game. Airlines, governments, international agreements, all part of it.
Right. Now, let's fly over to China. Colorful Guizhou Airlines is doing something really interesting with their pilot recruitment.
Yeah, I saw that. They're not just looking for A320 pilots, right? They want pilots for the C909, that new Chinese-made passenger jet.
Exactly. This is a big deal. Shows they have a lot of faith in the C909 to compete with the big guys like Boeing and Airbus. Colorful Guizhou Airlines already ordered 20 of them. They're all in on this plane.
So it's not just about a new plane. This could really shake things up, especially in the Asia-Pacific region where the C909 could become, a major player.
Yeah, totally. And this move by Colorful Guizhou Airlines also shows how important pilot training and recruitment is as airlines adjust to these new planes and the changing market,
It's a good reminder that it's not all about just the planes and routes. It's also about the people flying them.
For sure. Now, let's head to Indonesia. Pelita Air, they're dealing with a problem we hear about all the time.
Those supply chain issues, yeah, they're a real pain. What happened with Pelita Air?
Well, they were expecting 6 A320s this year. But now, because of these delays, they're only getting 4.
That's got to hurt their expansion plans, right?
Definitely. They were looking to add routes to places like Denpasar, Sorong, Lombok, and Kendari. And those plans might be on hold.
It's a perfect example of how these supply chain problems are messing with airlines' ability to grow.
Yeah, makes you wonder, how are other airlines dealing with this? Finding ways to work around these problems.
Right. Are there any clever solutions out there?
Well, some airlines are doing these sale and leaseback deals to get some quick cash and stay flexible with their fleet. Others are partnering up with regional airlines to fill in the gaps. Some are even keeping their older planes flying longer just to keep up.
It's pretty amazing to see how the industry is adjusting and finding workarounds.
Okay, last stop for today. India. Akasa Air. They're attracting a lot of attention from investors.
Really. They're pretty new to the scene in India, right?
Yep, but they've already made a splash. Word is that some big players connected to Manipal Group's Ranjan Pai and 361 Asset, they want a piece of Akasa Air.
That's got to be a good sign. They must be doing something right to get that kind of attention so quickly.
Well, the Indian aviation market is expected to grow a lot in the coming years, right? And Akasa Air, with their low-cost model and modern fleet, they're in a prime position to take advantage of that growth.
This investment could be huge for them, given the resources to expand, both within India and maybe even internationally.
Yeah, for sure. So, what are your thoughts so far? Anything standing out to you? Skytrans' move into ACMI or those bilateral agreements or maybe the supply chain chaos.
You know what's really striking me is the difference between Turkish Airlines hitting a wall in Canada and Akasa Air getting all this interest in India. Shows you how different regulations and markets can really impact an airline's path. Be interesting to see how these stories play out.
Yeah, great point. It's a good reminder of how complex and ever-changing the aviation industry is. It's interesting we were just talking about those supply chain issues. Pelita Air in Indonesia, they're a great example of how this is impacting everyone.
Yeah, it's a good reminder of how these disruptions are hitting airlines' plans right where it hurts. Having to adjust those A320 deliveries is going to affect those route expansions they were hoping for.
But what's interesting? Even with these setbacks, Pelita Air isn't giving up. They're still pushing ahead with their plans to expand in eastern Indonesia. They're still aiming for those destinations like Denpasar, Sarong, Lombok, Kendari. They're even thinking about their first international route, flights to Singapore Changi.
So they're basically rolling with the punches and adapting to all this uncertainty. Makes me wonder, how are other airlines handling this? Are there any creative solutions out there?
Oh, absolutely. Airlines are getting really innovative. Some are using these sale and leaseback arrangements, to free up some cash and stay flexible with their fleets. Others are teaming up with regional carriers to fill in the gaps. There are even some holding on to their older planes longer just to keep things running.
It's amazing to see how the industry is adapting and finding ways to make it work. Now, Akasa Air in India, they're another airline showing some real resilience in the face of challenges. Despite some regulatory scrutiny, they're still attracting a lot of investor interest.
Yeah, that's a really interesting case. Even with those show cause notices from India's Directorate General of Civil Aviation, about certain operational issues, they're still attracting investors. Remember those entities connected to Manipal Group's Ranjan Pai and 361 Asset we were talking about? They still want a stake in the airline.
It seems like investors see potential in Akasa Air for the long haul, even with those regulatory bumps. It really says something about the Indian aviation market. It's set for some serious growth in the years to come.
For sure. India is a huge market for aviation. And Akasa Air, with their focus on low-cost operations and a modern fleet, they're in a great spot to ride that wave of growth. This investment could be just what they need to expand their network, both inside India and maybe internationally.
It'll be fascinating to see how that investment plays out and what it means for Akasa Air's future. Speaking of investment and growth, let's shift to TUI Group. They're being more cautious with their capacity planning, even with all those new Boeing jets they have on order.
It's a calculated move for sure. Shows TUI Group's commitment to profitability and how well they understand the competition. Their CEO, he's made it clear that they're going for higher margins instead of just expanding rapidly. So instead of flooding the market, they're going to work with other airlines to handle any extra passenger demand, especially during those peak seasons.
Sounds like a smart move, especially with all the uncertainty around when those planes will actually be delivered. By working with partners and carefully managing their capacity, they're minimizing risk and putting financial stability first.
It's a smart financial strategy, but it could limit their market share growth in the long run. It's that classic balancing act, playing it safe versus going all out for a bigger piece of the pie.
It's a tough call for sure. It'll be interesting to see how TUI Group manages that balance. They're betting on profitability and sustainable growth, something a lot of other airlines are probably keeping an eye on, especially with the economy the way it is.
All right, let's take a step back for a second and think bigger picture here. With all these airlines competing, which business models do you think will really thrive in this environment?
Ooh, the million-dollar question. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, I think we're seeing a few key trends. Airlines that can adapt quickly, to those supply chain disruptions or changing passenger needs, they're going to have an advantage. The ones using technology to improve their operations and tailor the customer experience, they'll be in a good spot too.
Adaptability, efficiency, and putting the customer first, those seem like the keys to success in today's aviation world.
You got it. And let's not forget about partnerships. We're seeing more airlines teaming up to reach more places, share resources, and tackle those tough challenges. These alliances can be a real boost for growth and stability.
Collaboration is key. And those airlines investing in sustainability, that's becoming a big deal for travelers who care about the environment.
Absolutely. Sustainability isn't just a trend anymore. It's a must-have for airlines to stay competitive and appeal to those passengers who prioritize it.
It's really encouraging to see that change. Sustainability is no longer an afterthought.
Yeah.
It's all about attracting those travelers who want companies to reflect their values.
Right. And don't underestimate the power of technology to make the passenger experience better. Think personalized entertainment, smoother check-in with biometrics, all of that. Technology is helping airlines create a better and more efficient trip, which is a big deal in an industry where customer loyalty is everything.
It's amazing how much things have changed from the days of paper tickets and long lines. Technology has really transformed things.
Yeah.
But we haven't really talked about governments yet. What role do they play in the future of aviation?
Ah, that's a big one. Governments are involved in everything from safety standards to airspace regulations to infrastructure investments. As the industry changes, they'll have to adapt their policies and rules to support innovation, make sure there's fair competition, and keep the industry healthy in the long run.
It's complicated, but it's essential for the future of aviation. Speaking of the future, let's move to our final thoughts in part 3. We'll wrap things up and leave you with some things to think about. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? From Australia to Canada, China, Indonesia, even over to India.
Yeah, for sure. And it's fascinating to see how each story really gives us a peek into what makes the airline industry tick. All those factors, the economics, the politics, the technology, what passengers want, it's all connected.
It really is. It's like,
Yeah.
one big interconnected system where every little change has these ripple effects all over the place. But we've talked a lot about the challenges. What about the good stuff? What are some of the positive things you're seeing happening in the industry right now?
Well, one thing that's really encouraging is the focus on sustainability. More and more airlines are investing in fuel-efficient planes, looking at alternative fuels and just changing how they operate to reduce their impact on the environment. And it's not just about doing the right thing, it's becoming a major selling point for passengers who are really starting to choose airlines based on their sustainability efforts.
That's great to hear. It's like sustainability is going from just a nice to have to a core part of their business. It's all about connecting with those travelers who want to support companies that share their values.
Exactly. And then there's technology, which is transforming the passenger experience. Personalized entertainment, biometric check-in, all that stuff is making travel so much smoother and more enjoyable. And that can be a huge advantage in an industry where keeping customers happy is so important.
It's crazy to think how far we've come from paper tickets and long lines. Technology has really changed everything. But there's one thing we haven't talked about yet, the role of governments. How do you think they'll shape the future of aviation?
That's a big one. Governments are involved in pretty much every aspect of aviation, from safety regulations to airspace management to infrastructure development. As the industry keeps changing, they'll have to adapt their policies and regulations to support innovation, ensure fair competition, and just make sure the industry stays healthy in the long term.
It's a complex role, for sure, but definitely crucial for the future of aviation. So to wrap up our deep dive today, let's leave our listeners with something to think about. With all these trends happening, sustainability, technology, changing passenger expectations, and the role of governments, what do you think will be the defining features of the airline industry in the next, say, 10 years?
That's a great question. I think the next decade will be all about how airlines balance growth with sustainability, how they personalize the experience while staying efficient, and how they innovate while dealing with regulations. The airlines that can find that balance, the ones that can adapt and stay ahead of the curve, they'll be the ones that really take off.
Well said. And that's a wrap for this edition of the Complete Aviation Solutions Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us as we dug into the world of airlines. We hope you found it informative, maybe even a little inspiring. Until next time, keep your eyes on the skies.